what do you want to be doing differently? Because if this child is going to change coming home to you, how are you going to parent differently?
Hey, Trustyy Herd. I'm Dr. Tim Thayne, author and founder of Trustyy, and this is the Not by Chance podcast. On this podcast, we spotlight the latest innovations in adolescent treatment and show parents how to keep the momentum going at home. You'll hear real success stories from experts, families, and teens because your family's progress is not by chance. In today's episode, Shifting Paradigms, How Treatment Programs Are Further Empowering Teens, I'll be talking with Trina Packard about some of the recent shifts inside the adolescent treatment space and the factors that encourage them and how it can be applied at home as well. Trina has been working for youth care organizations since 1998. She's been a teacher, an academic director, program director, and CEO. Trina earned her bachelor's degree in special education and elementary education from Southern Utah University. In addition, she has a master's degree in educational counseling from the University of Phoenix. She was blessed with the opportunity to serve on the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs as president and vice president, and currently as president of the Utah chapter. But her greatest role is as mother to her two boys. Family first is the motto that she emulates with her leadership team at Youth Care. Trina, thank you for being here today, and I'm really excited about this. I've long watched you as a leader in our field and seen you as somebody that does it for the right reason and just has a passion for this work. That's the way I've visualized you over the years. And we were just talking about how you got into this space. Even though you've got this educational background, you ended up in the adolescent treatment space. So could you share with our audience how you began to work with teens?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to dialogue with you a little bit. You know, growing up as a kid, I knew that I wanted to do something in the helping profession. And I always aspired to be a principal. And as I started teaching in the elementary world, I was like, you know what? I feel like I have a greater calling, a greater cause. And how I got introduced into this mental health space is I got an opportunity to run the school in a inpatient psychiatric facility. And so at that point is when I really realized, you know, there are so many adolescents that are struggling with significant mental health that is impacting their education. But even greater than that is impacting their lives substantially. And wanting to be a part of the solution to try to help give them, you know, greater tools and a better ability to really be able to navigate this world. So started at inpatient work and did that. And then ultimately, as you said in my bio, moved into residential treatment. And I've been at youth care for about 27 years now. And I absolutely love the work that we get to do. So yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about my experience and some things that I might be able to bring to the audience.
Oh, I'm excited about that too, because I think about the accumulation of knowledge you have from a new graduate from college and teaching school, and then ultimately over the education of kids in a treatment program. So one of the things I like to highlight in this podcast is I believe that many of the things happening inside treatment programs, you know, if you think about it, they're trying, you know, programs are set up and they have a milieu we talk about that is designed to keep teens safe and at the same time help them progress in their life, whereas before they get there, they're stuck. And they need this special environment to do that. And over those 30 years or so, I'm sure you've seen so much change, you know, the evolution of the field, you know, and maybe the forces that require the evolution of the field. And, you know, I think that's true for us as families as well. We have to we have a different environment. Our families raising kids in. We have our own internal dynamics that we have to adjust over time as we go through the life cycle. And so we innovate. We have to, you know, adjust and innovate. With your role as the president of the Utah chapter of NATSAP, you have a pretty good perspective on what are the trends going on, what are the forces out there in the environment that are shaping kind of the way treatment goes and maybe shifts in the model itself. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that as you're kind of right in the epicenter of that, gathering information, sharing it with everyone, and trying to help the whole field kind of be lifted.
Yeah.
What are some thoughts you have about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel really blessed that I have been, asked to kind of in some ways lead the charge here in Utah.
Mhm.
Utah, for many, many years has been known as kind of the epicenter for treatment in residential. And it's really been known as the place to go to for great quality treatment, great providers, great clinicians, great doctors. It's really been known as that over the vast, almost 30 years that I've been doing this.
I know it's a little off topic, Trina, but
Yeah.
can you share with the audience a little bit, why is that the case?
Yeah, I think as we look at, the many individuals that are running these programs, I think so much of it is Utah, there are so many individuals that, helping others has really been the motto of either their family, their culture, and also there's a real entrepreneurial spirit. I think people really started to look at opportunities to help more. I'm in a private practice and I can only help a small group. And only help those in Utah. And I think what's happened is many folks got their great minds together and said, we could help those all around the country, and we could do it in very creative ways.
Mhm.
So I think great minds got together and really started to look at what is missing in our country. What are the things that are not working or that may not be effective? And can we come up with alternative interventions and things that we can do to help really meet the needs of these families and of these kids? So I think that's really where it started. And where the Utah chapter really evolved is really wanting to be a part of working with the state around creating good oversight. It's really important, I think, for families to know that there are entities that are out there that are designed to help keep their kids safe, but that are also designed to help elevate the game of the people that are providing that care.
Mm.
And so when I look at what NATSAP and our Utah chapter have done is we have set up opportunities to collaborate with the state who is responsible for enforcing the rules and the regulations around how to keep kids safe in programs. And over the years, I've seen that become more and more and more involved in the care of the students. And what it's done is it's really helped programs to improve in the patient experience and help them to be able to look at different ways of meeting staffing ratios, of really ensuring that the people that are providing the care are actually licensed and they're accredited. So I think that's been one thing that I've seen that's been helpful is the state has been really involved in wanting to work with residential treatment programs, wilderness programs, all of those programs to help it to be a more effective kind of, place for kids to be able to get help. I think on the downside, what we've seen is over the number of years, we've seen the resources diminish. And that really could be attributed to just economic factors and families not really being able to find a way to pay for treatment. And that's really been a hard thing to observe and watch in Utah, to see the market of resources that were available for families to really look at and to see there are 10 programs and which one would be the best one for my child. And now those resources are a lot smaller. And we're seeing in terms of, you're asking about trends, we're seeing more and more and more that families want options. They want options to be able to look at to see in my own home community, what are the resources that I can actually have access to? And if those resources are not working, where can I go and look and find other resources? So I think here in Utah, I think what providers have continued to try to do is to be a resource for families where in-home care and in their own communities has been exhausted and they have not been able to achieve the safety or the overall support that they felt like they really needed for their kids. So the Utah chapter, I think, has really also been a real great thing for providers in that it puts great minds together to say, what are you guys doing to help with kids that have anxiety? What are you doing to help with kids that are struggling with severe depression? So it really gives a good think tank for providers to be able to put their minds together and have these amazing clinicians come together to say, these are the things that we're doing in our program, and we're seeing them be extremely successful or we've tried these things and we're not seeing as many successes as what we had hoped for there to be. So I think those are some of the things that I think has really been helpful here in Utah, is to be a part of the solution, to be a part of helping to develop regulation and develop rules around it, and then also providing just a creative space with which to help people to continue to utilize their smart minds to create these amazing experiences for kids that really do affect long-lasting change.
That's great. What I'm hearing there in lots of levels is collaboration.
Yeah.
That I know in the past there's been, at least with some programs in the state, there's been tension.
hmm
And that regulatory role they play, and obviously, most programs are really interested in outcomes. They want there to be good outcomes, and so they're coming at it from the right perspective. But collaboration here, and you're talking about really a culture where programs are sharing good ideas with each other, attempts to address issues and needs, and maybe not succeed, and share that too.
Yeah.
I love that. And you all meet once a month, don't you?
Yeah, we do. We have, this network of providers here in Utah. We meet on a monthly basis. We talk about things that we're seeing. We talk about things that we can do that are better. And you mentioned a lot about outcomes. That is a big push. There's two things that we've continued to be very focused on. Number one is making sure that all the treatment that we're providing is evidence-based treatment, that it is treatment that is founded in research around how we actually are going to help meet the needs of all of those adolescents. The other thing is that all of these programs have a third party that is actually accrediting them. So a third party that is giving them their academic accreditation, someone that is outside of Utah providing that. In addition to that, all of these other organizations have to also have another healthcare accrediting organization, such as the Joint Commission or CARF, which also is another outside agency that comes in with a very different lens, providing insight. So evidence-based treatment is a big source of conversation for us. The second thing is outcomes. And as you mentioned, all of these programs are very focused in looking at, are the things that we're doing for treatment proven effective? So most families, when they come into treatment, we are having those families give us feedback at admission. What are you seeing with your child? And they're filling out a youth outcome questionnaire, which is a variety of questions that they ask about their kid. And we have the student do the same thing. And then during the course of treatment, we continue to re-ask those questions and re-engage those, which helps us to get an idea on, are we being successful in our interventions? And then at discharge, we do that, and then post-discharge. And as a way for all of us to say, okay, Trina, what you think is working in your program, actually, it may not be working. And so all of these programs are very, very focused on, families need to know nowadays that what are you doing to make sure that my kid is safe? But in addition to that, what sort of treatment interventions are you using? And how do you know that what you're using is actually really working? Those are some of the main questions that I think most treatment providers in Utah are being asked by families is, how do we know that by sending my child here, what can I expect is going to be different? And how do I know in working with my kids? So we're able to show families some of the outcomes that have happened for hundreds of families that have been through some of our residential programs. And that's not just my program. That is a wide variety of programs in Utah that belong to that national association, where we really are focused in, as I mentioned, evidence-based treatment, ongoing talk about that, and then ongoing conversations about outcomes and how we can do a much more effective job at meeting the needs of these families.
It's really fun to think about, how far it's come in the last 10 years around this research, this outcome, focus. I love that. Well, let's move to the topic of what are some of the trends. And we talked about earlier, one of those being really the teens' experience through treatment.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to touch on that and talk about what you're seeing out there. And maybe, is the jury still out a little bit? There's definitely this kind of tension point of structure on one side and support to make sure that they're safe. To make and in the past there's been this, how do we measure It's almost like, how do we measure the trust we have in their ability at this point in time through their program? And how do what does that look like as they're more able to kind of call the shots on
Right.
their own in treatment? Anyway, there's a lot to talk about here, but I think that's an area I'd love to go to, because I think that's a pretty significant trend inside the treatment space.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to answer that, I think in looking at it, is that, that old adage is that if businesses and organizations don't evolve to meet the needs of their customers, they're not going to be in business anymore. And I think we've seen that a lot in Utah, is programs that said, I've been doing it this way for 30 years. I'm going to continue to do that. And what we've seen is those programs are no longer in existence, because they haven't been willing to look at the way that we help families is definitely different than what it was 30 years ago, and even 5 years ago. And so, to answer that, I think there's a couple of things that we've seen. In my 30 years, when I first started, there was a lot that was based around structure. Programs were developed and parents wanted kids to come in and right the ship, get my kid turned around and, send him home. And the focus was only on the kid. The parents would drop them off, right?
Yeah. And it was almost like this: I'm going to drop my car off at the shop, and you're going to, tinker with the engine and fix the engine, and then you're going to send it back to me and it'll drive the right way.
Absolutely.
It was sort of a mechanical metaphors were used, I think, 30 years ago.
I definitely think so. And I think parents were exhausted. They were exhausted with the fear of, the behaviors that many of their kids were involved with, whether it was running away or drugs or promiscuity or trouble in school. These were substantial issues these parents were faced with. And there is just such a relief to know that my kid's in a safe place. And they leave and think, great, let's solve it. Well, what we found is that we know that that's not the case. It's a family system that needs to evolve and that needs to be looking at adjusting. So I think 30 years ago, that's how we approached it. Our work is with the kid, and then some family therapy and some family work, but really ultimately the identified patient is the kid.
And it was very behavioral.
Very much so.
In the sense that, the program would outline almost behaviors that needed to happen to get to these levels, right? And so they literally could kind of jump through the hoops, maybe not change much on the inside, because you're hoping, but behaviorally they're watching that and they're seeing some progress that looks like progress. And I guess that worked okay at some level back then.
Absolutely. I think that it did. And I think that over time, we began to really look at it and to see, was it sustainable? Was true change really actually happening? And I think as the years have evolved, it became more, this is what I'm seeing now, is that you are all in treatment. The whole family system is in treatment. And when we look at it yes, the student is the one that is in care. But what we want to make sure that we're looking at is how are we helping the whole entire family system? So many programs are looking at it as almost a requirement or an ask of parents. You either need to get into treatment yourself, meaning get into some form of therapy, or do some things that you need to do to look at your parenting style. So I think that's a trend that is, really evolved over the last number of years, is encouraging parents to do their own work around what do you want to be doing differently? Because if this child is going to change coming home to you, how are you going to parent differently?
It's so fun to hear you say that, honestly, and with such clarity. What's flashing back to me was, I helped start a wilderness treatment program way back when. And while I'm there, I'm watching the changes happen right before my eyes. It almost seemed like I was cheating, because you got Mother Nature full time helping you do it. A lot of the parents would see the change in both the letters, and then when they came out to visit the teenager, they would think they had their child back. I was all back. And they were giving me, as a therapist, a lot of the credit. And I wanted to push that off, because I knew that I played a very small role. There was all this other going on, good staff and Mother Nature and all those things. And I was a little bit naive, to be honest, very naive, because I watched that and I thought, they could go home.
They're fixed.
They're ready to go.
Yeah, they're ready to go.
They can, and it was so powerful that I believed it could withstand the environments they were going to go back to and still stay somewhat solid. I learned very quickly that it was kind of this, it was real, but it was not now real in the more challenging context of the family system and the environment they're going to go back to. And so it had a huge test to overcome, to make that happen. And that's when I saw, I'm a marriage and family therapist. So I've always had the paradigm of the family system. And I knew that while these settings can be very powerfully, designed, if you're a residential program or you have Mother Nature, that's part of the design in a wilderness program, very, very powerful. But we didn't, at the time, almost give credence to the power of the context they're going back to. Like it was like they're going to do this here, and somehow that's going to magically transfer into the real world. And so that's when I started Homeward Bound way back when. And at the time, I will tell you, I felt like a lone voice.
I think you were. I think you were the only one that was out there saying we need to change.
It was
right?
so lonely. It was like, guys, this is really important that the family system be a part of this. And is it Ellen Behrens?
Yeah, Dr.
She
Ellen
was
Behrens,
the other one. I remember being at a conference, and she started to talk like that. And I'm like, hallelujah. Here's someone that gets it.
Yes.
And I connect with her right away, and I'm like, it's so fun to, talk to you, to hear you speak, to, do all of that. But I think that in the field, as you've said, those who have really kind of recognized that and other things that needed to adjust and change, those are the ones that are surviving today.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about, so we know the family system is really the target of the entire process. There needs to be work done there. But while the teens in treatment, let's talk about now how they're being engaged maybe differently now than they have been in the past. If you're tired of having power struggles with your teen over freedoms and privileges, put the ball in their court and have them create a plan for how they're going to earn back that freedom. We've got a tool for you. It's free. You can find it at trustandfreedom.trustyy.com. You can find that in the description below.
Again, I mean, I think in looking at, you highlight Dr. Behrens, she's one individual that really is at the cornerstone of a lot of, I think, transformative work that's really been done, is these people who've been willing to step in and say, we need to look at it differently. You, Dr. Behrens, Dr. Michael Gass, there's so many individuals that really, truly use their experience in marriage and family therapy and in treatment to really help us to open up our eyes a little bit more to say, we can do better, we can do more. So in looking at the experience for the adolescents, I think more and more programs are really looking at how can I improve the experience for teens? Okay, like no teenager wants to not have their cell phone, not be around their friends, not have their vehicles, and do what they want when they want. We know that. But what can we add into the environment to help them to recapture some of that joy that they had? Instead of, I think many years ago, it really was around, I'm going to behaviorally reshape you. And I think now it's more, I hate to use the word behavioral and clinical, but I do think that there's a distinct difference. They are connected, but I think we are approaching these adolescents and these families with a more clinical lens, with a more of, it's what happened to you. Let's evaluate what happened to you in your life. And we come to it, I think, with a little bit more, we call it trauma-informed care, right? Mm-hmm. We're coming with a more of a lens of, there have been a lot of difficult things that have happened to many of these kids. How can I meet them with where they are and help them to recapture the joy they had in their life, and then help them to translate that and move forward? So I think what's really shifted and changed is,
before you, and don't forget where you're at, because I'm thinking about, parents who have kids coming into these programs that are really stuck.
Yeah.
And you've got the safety concerns, and you want them to kind of recapture some of the joy. How do they get from, entry into a program with a lot of need for a lot of oversight, maybe not a lot of freedom, like you said, the removal of a lot of things in their life that they want and they would choose to have if they could.
Yeah.
So they're not there on their own volition,
Yep.
most of them.
Yep.
And so how do we get from that to this joyful, a little bit more of, hey, I get to make more choices and try to recapture some of the joy in my life?
I think the way that they're able to do that is if you look at all of these settings, imagine for all of us, and that is that you have somebody that is watching over you 24/7, and you're in a fishbowl, and they're providing suggestions and guidance. And it's not only the providers, it's the other kids, right? It's getting into a group of other kids and going, oh, I had no idea that you had that experience. Well, I had that experience. And how did you overcome that? How did I overcome that? I think that it is creating where programs are successful, in my view, is creating a space for kids to feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Whether or not that vulnerability starts with their therapist, whether that starts with their peers, and being able to translate that from the therapy office into the environment in which they're living. And I think that's the magical part about these programs is you've got kids at all different stages. You've got kids that are just coming in that are just very angry at their parents, very angry about being uprooted, and don't think their problems are as bad as they are.
Yeah.
And other kids that are towards in the middle of their therapy that are like, yeah, nice try, buddy. You're here because of whatever. So I do think that you don't get from, I don't want to mislead parents to think that it's like day 1 they come in and day 5 they're here. No, it is a absolute progression. But I think what it is when kids feel that people care about them and they feel supported and they're in an environment where it feels like they are willing to be vulnerable, and then their parents are seeing them differently, like they're willing to engage, like for a parent to say, I screwed up, Tim. I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have engaged with you in that way. Kids are then able to it becomes that money in the bank. Well, my parents are listening. So I think it really is, you used the word magical earlier. I think that the treatment environment is so magical. There's so many different players that affect these kids and affect their change. The other thing that I think that happens is programs nowadays are utilizing a lot of parental interventions. And what I mean by that, in the old days, it might have been, and I mean 30 years ago, a parent might come one time while the kid's in treatment, one time. Now there's a lot more of that. We can do FaceTime. We can do parent support groups together. There's a lot more parental work that is done, and the encouragement of parents to come in to treatment and see what it's like, a day in the life of a parent in treatment. More programs are doing that, where parents are able to say, holy cow, this is hard. Watch their kids in a group setting to see them be vulnerable and encouraging their parents to be vulnerable. So it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. And that's why residential and wilderness programs, that's why they work so effectively, taking them out of an environment that has been either toxic or problematic, creating a new environment where they're able to try on some skills and do it in a safe place. Because we know you go into high school, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. In a high school, those kind of things are not happening day to day, but in a treatment environment, it's happening all of the time. But I'm going to, share one other thing that I think programs are really doing that's really helping parents and kids. We're doing a lot about skills. We're teaching kids skills. Like you said, families and kids left treatment and they didn't have a lot of skills. They remembered some of the things. They could rely on their journals. They could rely on some of the things they had. Nowadays, I think many more programs are giving families and kids tangible tools when they're struggling, when they become dysregulated and they want to go cut or they want to go use drugs or run away. We are helping to prepare them. When this happens, not if, when this happens, here's some things that you can do that is going to help you to do that. We teach their parents the same thing that we're teaching the kids so that they are then, as a family system, they're talking more about that. And I think there's a lot more vulnerabilities in families now because of the work that I'm going to use the word force because I do think that it is forced work in the beginning. Ultimately, I don't think that it is towards the end, but I think many of these powerful CEO fathers are not interested in tapping into their feelings, but as they begin to really see their kids' vulnerability, they need to. And then when their kid can see them being vulnerable, that's, I think, when you
You're
can
starting
really
to
see the.
affect the family system.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that answers what you're
That's
suggesting.
awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about how powerful that culture is with the the students at different stages of their progression, and you end up with some leaders of those cultures and really helping support the overall process of treatment, because they like, oh, you were kind of where I was before the last few months,
Mhm.
and now I see you as a different person than what you've described,
Yeah.
and so it's very powerful. I think we tend to change better together if it's set up right than we could ever do by ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really powerful principle. So now back to the kind of the evolution
Yeah.
of for the teen and their experience. They've gotten past that point of the beginning of the full resistance, and I'm here against my will, and I'm starting to be a little bit more vulnerable. And that is a fun sign as a
Yeah.
therapist and a
Yep.
program. When you start to see them do that, you go, yes,
Yes, they're getting it.
it's coming. And that's the first step for them to get a lot out of that process.
Mhm.
And so they're moving along. And what are some of the unique things that are, treatment programs are starting to do now to really engage them and make it more joyful for them
Mhm.
to be in treatment, which in my mind, if they're having more fun, more joy, more uh, engagement, well, that's the ultimate outcome.
Yep.
They're
It is.
engaging in the process. And so talk to us about that, some of the things being done in programs that
Yeah.
improve engagement.
And this is where I'll give some kudos to some of the things that may have happened, on a legislative front or on a,
Mhm.
on a front for the, the state oversight is really challenging programs to look at some things that they could approach and do differently,
Mhm.
in terms of how we approach students that are extremely dysregulated and what interventions may need to be utilized for students that are looking at that. So,
Mhm.
I think the state has helped us to do that. And there's, been a term that really in the last probably 5 years is really, I think most of us looking at as how can we improve the dignity and the respect of the kids that we're treating? So,
Mhm.
you think about how hard that is and how demoralizing that is for a kid
Yeah.
when you're taking everything away from me.
Yeah.
Everything, all the way down to, in some places, what I can wear, my
Mhm.
jewelry, my makeup, all of those things. So how can programs really look at providing opportunities for kids to have some of that dignity back? So I think many programs are looking at it like starting things like student councils,
Mm.
where they have the ability to have the students become the voice. Simple things like what they eat. Okay, where the student council can talk about what activities they want to do, what they eat. Are there things that they could change in terms of their group schedule or what they're doing in school? I think more programs are actually having the students become a part of the voice. One of the greatest ones that I've seen programs really stepping into is, you always encourage kids and families to become part of the treatment planning and
Mhm.
part of the treatment process, right? You always
Mhm.
want to sit down and say, these are the goals we're working on. What I'm seeing happen now is the kids are a lot more a part of like, I don't really think that goal really applies. I think this goal really applies. Not necessarily moving into the driver's seat, but really working simultaneously with their therapist and their teachers around, you know what? I really think that I can do more. I think I could do this. And so having the students really coming into treatment, not only to get that validation around the good work that everybody's seeing that they're doing, but for them to become, it's your treatment, Tim. What would you like to get out of your treatment? And I think we're asking more of those kinds of questions to the kids and asking more kinds of that, meaning, can I go home tomorrow? Well, that's not a determination that we get to
Right.
make. But while you're here, what would be some things that we could do that would make it a lot more fun? Okay, going to movies, bringing movies in, having having an activity, having a water fight, having some things that allow them to be kids
Mhm.
and allowing them to be able to get that joy. I think more and more programs are having in their mind, what are the things that we can do to create more dignity for our kids? What are the things that we can do? They're missing out on their proms.
I
They're
love it.
missing out on their dates. They're
Yeah.
missing out on some of those things. We may not be able to recapture that, but what can we do that gives them an opportunity to just have fun again and be involved in making those determinations? You talked a lot about kind of home contracting in your business that you had before. How do we help kids be a part of saying, when I get home, what's the appropriate amount of screen time?
Yeah.
Well, as a parent, I think you should have 1 hour a day, right? As a kid, I think I should have 7. We are teaching kids about how to negotiate. And I don't think that we did a great job of that in the past, because I think kids were all about parents are the dictators and what they say goes. That is ultimately true when it comes to safety and in everything. But for parents and kids, we can find that our kids are actually a lot more capable than what we thought they were if we allow them to have a voice in what it is that they are suggesting or recommending. So
Yeah.
I think programs are teaching parents how to compromise and how to give and take a little bit when it are items that are not related to safety.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing for kids. Is there are things that are non-negotiables in our house, right? You can't drive 100 miles an hour. That's not a non-negotiable. Using drugs and alcohol, non-negotiables. So I think programs are really, really looking at how can we focus on helping the kid and the parent to develop some negotiation so that when we return, the fight is not there.
Yeah.
Because we've already done the fighting in treatment with people that are going to help
Supporting
them.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you kind of went back and said, I've got to give some credit to the state, because the reality is if things are kind of working well enough, we don't think to innovate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes we do need an outside force or pressure, or maybe it's an economic issue or whatever it is, those forces that get us to rethink the model.
Right.
And because I had this experience, I shared it with you. I mean, for years in our program where we help families transition their teen home after treatment, we knew how important that transitional planning was at the end of a treatment program, because that's kind of the roadmap going forward. It answered a lot of questions for the parents, because one of their biggest concerns is, what should we expect when they get home? And they needed some clarity around that. So did the teenager. And so at the end, and this was a pet peeve of mine, most programs didn't put a ton of effort into that, because I think in hindsight now, at the time I'm like, why don't they put more time into this? But it was only a couple of months ago, I had a group of parents where many of them had their teen home already. And we hadn't been, they weren't like clients of ours where we had supported them in the transition. We were just kind of doing a group, a parenting group for them. And one of the fathers said something that just really woke me up. He said, my son's been home for about a month, and it's been at least 3 weeks since we even looked at the transition plan. And all of the other parents on the Zoom call, they're all nodding, like, yep, that's us too. It was like that person. And I'm like, for the first time, I realized that it wasn't working. That transition planning process was broken. And I hadn't seen it in
Real
20
life.
years, because we were hovering over the family system. We were kind of handling that whole thing. We were making sure that it was happening, that the parents were accountable to follow through on their end. The teen was really clear on what it was. And so we didn't see it as a problem. And as soon as I got pulled out of that, where there was, and by the way, that was a very intensive oversight that was happening for us. But again, that's not what everybody can do. And so now I'm looking at this saying, okay, if you can't have that kind of support after treatment, what do you do? These plans just fail. And so that's what triggered me to like, okay, we have to go back to really. The other most important thing was, he said that, and if I ever bring up the plan, my son is saying, oh, that was for way back when I first got home. In other words, he's distancing from that plan. The plan requires responsibility.
That's right.
And he's wanting to get away from that. And so, he'd like the freedoms that come without the responsibilities that are there. And so what we've been working on is I'm so excited about it because it flips the whole thing on its head. And it's exactly what's happening inside of treatment programs right now. We're putting the teen in the driver's seat where they own the plan, where they're the ones that are the first author of the plan. Like if you're writing a journal article, there's a order to who put the most effort into it. It doesn't mean the parent doesn't have input and shouldn't. They ought to do some editing probably in a lot of these cases. But I thought, wouldn't it be nice if the teen was the first author of the plan, feedback from the therapist, from his parents as well, but ultimately when they get home, they can then say, okay, it's very clear how I'm going to achieve more of the things back that were taken from me when I left. I can't just immediately demand I get everything back.
That's right.
So how do I get there in a plan that I've created? And I'll tell you, early indications are it's going to be a phenomenal improvement.
Yep.
And so we're calling it the and I'm trying to get this right, the Trust and Freedom Recovery Tool.
What I love about that, though, is not only that, it sounds like so much more of, like, I think in the beginning with Homeward Bound, it was, oh, goodness gracious, the kid's going to leave tomorrow. We need to get the plan in place.
Yeah.
I think programs now are looking at discharge discussion starts at admission. At admission, we should be looking at what is it going to look like when this child leaves.
That's ideal.
It is ideal. And not only that, if the kid is authoring it, you're moving through treatment and their lens will continue to morph and change as they're going through that. And, like, oh, wow, this is where I was at here. That's what was important to me here. But now I'm 3 months in. That wasn't as important to me anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
And if they're involved in the treatment planning all the way through, all it is at the end is it's this next step of the treatment plan. And it happens to be transferring back home where my parents are going to play a bigger role in my life now. So that's really the vision for us now, is that we can help that happen and make it easy for those parents through this technology for the plan to be in the tool, and immediately it just away they go.
Yep.
And it's authored by the teen and they move forward.
I think what I love about that is not only that the kid has ownership and a willingness to step into it, but also it gives us support afterwards. And I think I know that many of the programs that we've looked at and that we've talked to, those kids and families that do better are the ones maybe not necessarily that follow the plan to a T, but that they have a support system set up for them, whether or not, whatever that support system looks like, whether it's ecclesiastical leaders, whether or not it is, a psychiatrist, whether it's a therapist, whatever it is. And those that tend to return and need care are the ones that didn't follow any of those, whether it was an aftercare plan or whether it was with providers. So I think that plan is wonderful combined with who are the new support systems that this family has in place.
And that should be
to
in
replicate,
the plan.
right?
And that is the plan.
In the plan. Yeah.
That really should be. Like, hey, who do you think can support you after treatment?
Yeah.
And what we've done in the past, it's been reversed. We'd ask the parents, who do you think, your teen's going to need to support them after treatment? And there was a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah.
But again, that's how we're learning. We're learning to figure out how to really involve the teenager in their future. What's your 6-month vision?
Yeah.
After treatment.
Yep.
So talk about, hey, now that you've got evidence that you don't have to, have the same struggles and problems in terms of how do you, your problematic ways you tried to solve your problems in the past. That doesn't have to be the case in the future. Now you've got evidence for a better life, and you know who you are now better. What do you think you could do in 6 months from now? Let's think about that, and let's create a plan that gets you there. So it's more about that than avoiding relapse.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Really, it's easy to say that, but what do you do? What are the steps? How do you get there?
Yeah. So
I love that.
It's exciting developments going on in the field.
Wonderful.
I just absolutely, when you mentioned that a couple of days ago when we talked, I was just like, that is the topic, because to me, when I think about the success stories, it has been, in most cases, teens who have ultimately owned it. They've decided that that's what they want.
Yep.
And maybe in some cases, in spite of all the maybe structure and things that we had in the way, they found that, and many did over the years. But I think this is a huge adjustment
Yep.
in the field that is going to pay huge dividends for these teens and their families, going forward. So
I totally agree with you. And I think the other part too is, for parents that are listening, I think one of the other keys for them is that they need to make sure that they understand that times are different. There are more resources that are out there. We are talking more about mental health as a society. I get asked that question all the time is, I'm sure you do too, is, are the kids in the families sicker than what they were before? It's really hard to know whether they're sicker, or is it just that we're a society that's a little bit more open to talk about it? Has depression always been there, but now we feel more comfortable having more of a conversation? There's more resources, there's more support around that. So I think the more that families can actually own the fact and understand this is going to be a challenge for my child. My child has depression. Okay, what does that mean? And how can we all help to better understand what that looks like? I think education for families is so important. And
it is.
we know that if they stay involved in terms of, it's not just about talking with their kid, but it's helping to understand that after treatment is an up and down roller coaster. How many parents, when their kid leaves, is like, sweet, they're fixed. This is awesome. It's great. No. It's going to continue to be a roller coaster ride.
It's like phase one
exactly
of the intervention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it continues when they get home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an exciting time in my, way of seeing things. I think there's going to be huge advancements, and thank heavens there's pressures to help us move when we need to, and to improve what we're doing. One of the things I just want to touch on before we end is that, we're talking about kind of empowering the teen, and the parents are probably going, what's my job?
Yeah.
And they probably remember that the teen was probably at the top of the hierarchy before they went to treatment in an unhealthy way, where there was, the teen struggling to deal with the challenges in their life, and they may do things that put them in a stuck position later on, and the parents feel powerless and they don't know what to do. Well, I want to just assure them that they still have a huge role.
Absolutely.
It's not like you're saying, hey, you write the script and we'll just cheer you on from the sidelines. In fact, there are parents, many of us have gone too far that way in the past, where we're like hands off and we're not really playing the key role that we need to play.
Right.
So this is kind of a nuanced thing where, yes, we want them to take as much power as they can maturely do it. And at the same time, we need to step in and make sure that they have a leader in their life as well when that's needed. And it's tricky to know, how much do I do this? But I found that if you start by letting them begin the process, if they have the vision of, hey, you want to have these freedoms in the future, and I want you to have those as well, and we want to get there in a healthy way, and I want to get there as soon as you can. So create a plan in your mind that would address my concerns as your parent, that would help you learn from the things of the past. So I know that you're kind of bringing along with you what you've learned from your treatment experience, and would also have a smart kind of, hey, few quick wins up here, not all at once, but what are the quick wins? And then ultimately, we want to get to where you want to go. But let's talk about this in a ramp kind of fashion. And if you present something to me like that, I'm likely to get really excited. I'm likely to approve and maybe do a little editing, but that's it.
Yep.
And then you can be in charge of that plan. So I guess I wanted to just say a little something about the parent, because they play a really key role. And that's quite a leadership thing to do, to say, okay, I can trust you quite a bit here. You've got something, you've got a track record now in the program.
Yep.
And I don't know how much I can trust you yet, because you don't even know how much you can trust yourself yet once you leave the structure of this environment you're in. But let's create a plan that you can get excited about, that you can own, and we can support you in.
Well, and I think for parents, it also has to be something to look at. What we were doing didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so it didn't work. We're going to propose a new way of looking at it. Parents still need to have guardrails. They need to have guardrails around, these are the things that we are,
like you said, non-negotiables.
Non-negotiables, we're not going to do that. And at the same time, parenting is more, like, how can we have these parents become more of your cheerleaders, more of your validators? And at the same time, kids are going to push the envelope. They're going to do that.
That's their job.
It is their job. But ultimately, I think we have to remember as parents, what is our job? Our job is to help these adolescents to become adults, right? And that's our job. And what's the best way that we can do that? They learn from their mistakes, and we help to guide them and teach them so that the mistake is not so bad that it can't be reversed.
Yeah.
And I think so many parents continue to reflect back on, well, this is what happened. This is what happened. We have to be able, I wouldn't recommend saying a clean slate. I'd recommend saying, you know what? You've got to give them an opportunity to show you that things are different, and you can remember what happened in the past, but you can't use that as leverage because the kids are feeling that. You're not going to give me a chance because you're going to automatically assume that I was doing X, Y, and Z. So I think and for parents, there's so many more resources that are out there now for parents. And I think for a parent, it's like, how do you find good resources that continue to help you to be on your path of good parenting?
One of the things I hope you'll come back for that we'll talk about, that we discussed in our call the other day, is the emotional regulation piece. Because think about it, in the context of a teen coming home, there's been trauma, not just for the teen, but for the parents. And so they're easily emotionally triggered. Fear is a big one. Anxiety about the future. Sometimes they'll think when they see the first little mistake starting to happen, was it all for naught? And so there's a lot of need for emotional management in order for them to play that leadership role. And so that's another big one. You talked about really practical things you're trying to give the teens in treatment programs, and that's really our emphasis as well, really practical things to help them succeed afterwards, including their parents. And that's the big one. That's one of the biggest. So we'll definitely come back and talk about that.
Sounds great.
Hopefully we'll get you back over here.
Sounds great. Love to.
Thank you so much for your time. You're just a fountain of knowledge that we've benefited from today. And we can see the connection between the evolution of what's going on in treatment programs and the good things happening and what we can do at home. So I believe the parents are going to find this very helpful, as well as treatment professionals.
Well,
so
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time. It's great. It's awesome. This is a wonderful experience. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you for joining us for this episode. And if you watched it from start to finish, that means you found value in it. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe and share this with friends, and please leave a comment. Also, before you go, I wanted to tell you about a special offer we have right now. We have 1/2 off all of our packages at Trustyy for our coaching that we do. And you can find that at trustyy.com. And that's Trustyy with 2 Y's. Also, we want to make you aware of a new tool that we're just bringing out right now. And it is a tool to help your teen identify something they may have lost, a freedom or privilege they've lost, and maybe the trust has been lowered. And it's a way for them to create a plan to address the trust issues and ultimately get back their freedom. So in this case, they're in the driver's seat, and they will own it, and most likely follow through a whole lot better if it starts like that. You can find that at trustandfreedom.trustyy.com, and that's again with 2 Y's on the Trustyy. And for your teen to create that plan is free, and it's fun.